Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the first ever Russia-Africa summit wraps up in Sochi. President Vladimir Putin said the event is historic, claiming it's a page that's turned in relations between the regions. Also, Moscow's also been using a lighter touch in its wooing of the continent. We head to a pageant in Bangui in Central African Republic, sponsored with Russian cash. And the media boss behind recent unrest in Ethiopia calls for calm from his supporters. Oromo protesters took to the streets this week after Jawar Mohamed's home was surrounded. At least 16 people have been killed in unrest that followed. But first, the first ever Russia-Africa summit wrapped up Thursday in Sochi. President Vladimir Putin said the event is historic. He is surely hoping for that to be the case. Russia is far behind the West and China in African trade and investment. Economic and military projects were at the heart of Russia's bid for more influence. It is currently the continent's biggest arms supplier. Well, Maria Georgieva joins us now with more from Sochi. Maria, so Russia literally pulled out the big guns for this conference. What's with all the weapons being aimed at this African charm offensive?
Well, Moscow specializes in these cheap arm deals because this is something that gives Putin power all over the continent. This is about military cooperation. It's about strengthening the defense industries. We've seen this happening since 2014. It's been growing. So it means that about 19 African countries have signed deals with Putin already about strengthening the military cooperations. But it's not only about arms and supplying guns to Africa. It's also about these private Russian military companies or military mercenaries that are deployed in the Central African Republic recently, since before they've been to Libya or Sudan. They're helping embattled governments with their assessment, economical protection. But also they're offering basically human lives to protect other governments. So this is something that has been broadly discussed here at the forum. In a sense, for Russia, it's about strengthening these cooperations, but also seeking new opportunities and new partners in several countries. And we've seen, for example, that Russia and Niger have signed a new deal on helicopters, new military helicopters that will be deployed to Niger. So we're seeing a lot of new deals being made, and this is something that definitely is going to continue.
So Putin
even
seems to
after
be,
the summit.
So Putin clearly is well, he sounds like he's pretty pleased by the way that it's all turned out. He said that this has turned a page in relations between Russia and Africa. Overall, has it really?
Well, what's interesting here is that Putin likes semi-authoritarian leaders because he's seeking common ground. So even if the Russian economical state is not able to overinvest, like, for example, China and the US, these are the major giants, investment giants in the African continent, and Putin cannot compete with them. But still, this authoritarian leadership that Putin himself stands for applies to the values and the common ground with the African leaders. But also here, Russia seems to be acting out of self-interest. So they're striking a lot of deals or saying that they are going to cooperate more in the future. But actually what the outcome would be and how much money this will amount to in the future is very difficult to say concretely. So it really is about that Russia wants to take the global stage and show that this is an important economical power, which still is questionable, of course.
Thank you so much there, Maria Georgieva, who has been covering the first ever Russia-Africa summit for us in Sochi. Well as knocking on Africa's front door with offers of investment and trade, Russia's also been trying to boost its presence with a lighter touch by supporting cultural projects on the continent. One surprising choice has been a beauty pageant in Central African Republic. Our correspondents report.
Some glamour in a war-torn country, a little glitz in the midst of a bloody conflict. This was a couple of months ago at the main stadium in Bangui. Behind the scenes, some Russian flags in the decor of this Miss Central African Republic beauty pageant, an event sponsored by Russia with millions of rubles in the presence of a beauty queen from Moscow, a show attended by several Russian diplomats.
Like Fyodor Dostoevsky said, a renowned Russian writer, beauty will save the world. And so we decided to honor the beauty of the Central African Republic today. It's through cultural events like this that we can help Central African Republic.
For Moscow, culture has become a field for soft power and a perfect investment opportunity. Events backed by some local NGOs, which could not find sponsorship anywhere else.
Our initial budget was 44 million CFA francs. We applied all over and got no response except from Russia. We could not turn them down.
Over a year since arriving in Bangui, Russian presence has grown more subtle. There has been less propaganda in Moscow-funded media and fewer patrol of private Russian soldiers in the streets of Bangui. But outside the city capital, the former palace of Despot Bokassa is a symbol of Russian presence in the Central African Republic. It is now a training center for Russian instructors who have already trained about 3,000 Central African soldiers. Russia has already supplied the country with over 400 tons of ammunition and small arms, and now Central African Republic is requesting some heavy weapons from Moscow.
Well, in other news, the man at the heart of protests in Ethiopia this week has called for his supporters to back down. In Addis Ababa on Thursday, media boss and activist Jawar Mohamed told demonstrators to stay calm but alert. There were more rallies on Thursday. At least 16 people have died since protests first began on Wednesday after police fired on crowds. Jawar helped propel Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to power last year, but relations between them has since soured. Jawar's house was surrounded by police on Tuesday evening after Abiy accused unnamed media figures of promoting ethnic interest over national unity. Protests quickly followed. Abiy won the Nobel Peace Prize this month for bringing in sweeping reforms after he came to power. But Jawar on Thursday challenged the Prime Minister's image as a peace bringer.
Change has come, but that change has not been consolidated. The political sphere was opened up, but I think it's closing now. I think there is a risk of getting off the track. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if we are on the right track for the transition to democracy. What worries me is not even a return to dictatorship. I think we passed that exit. I think what our leaders need to be very, very, very careful is there is no social, economic, and security condition for return to dictatorship. If anybody tries to do that, that will be inviting not civil war, but catastrophic communal violence across the country.
Well, organisers of marches in Guinea say that 1 million people took to the streets of Conakry on Thursday in the latest rallies against President Alpha Condé. Local media has put the number at around a couple of hundreds of thousands. Many wore red in remembrance of those killed in last week's demonstrations, when at least 8 were killed. Unrest broke out over fears that President Alpha Condé is angling to change the constitution to overcome a ban on running for a third term in next year's elections. And the fast and fatal rise in the rate of terror attacks in Burkina Faso since 2015 has displaced more than 500,000 people. That's left thousands upon thousands of children out of school. Our correspondent sent us this report.
Every morning, ZENAB heads to a makeshift camp on the outskirts of Ouagadougou to visit families displaced inside their own country. They've all witnessed the destruction of their villages at the hands of terrorist groups. ZENABs come with school supplies collected by her aid organisation. The child rights activist has been trying to get these kids into school since the start of term.
There are schools just next door, but they want us to pay to get the children into classes. We don't have any sponsors, and they also can't afford it. These people have lost everything. They're left to fend for themselves. The town hall found us 60 classrooms, but it's all a bit far, around 7 to 8 kilometers away, too far for a primary school student to get there.
The government says it can't help any of the internally displaced who stay in Ouagadougou. Camps have been set up north of the city, but many say they're frightened of more terror attacks and refuse to leave the capital.
We don't take any internally displaced people in Ouagadougou. We offer the displaced that are here the possibility to go to the zones where we are present and have the means to help them. If they don't go, we don't register them in Ouagadougou.
NGOs say that the government is legally bound to provide its children with an education.
There was a ministerial decree this year stating that any child of an internally displaced person, whatever their age, whatever their level of education, wherever they live, or whatever their ethnic group, must be accepted by a school, if there is a school where the family has settled. And there are more than a few displaced people in Ouagadougou.
Since 2015, increasingly frequent terror attacks have closed more than 2,000 schools across Burkina Faso, leaving more than 200,000 children without formal classes. Many lives have been lost to the security crisis facing the country. Without education, many more will lose lifetimes of potential and opportunity.
Well, that's it for Eye in Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.